President.
Senator from Illinois.
Mr. President, at this moment, the Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid and the Republican leader, Senator Mitch McConnell, are gathered on the east front of the United States Capitol on the steps with members of the House of Representatives. It is a bipartisan gathering to commemorate the 11th anniversary of the terrible tragedy of 9/11. On that date, the gathering was more spontaneous, but it reflected a feeling of unity, which all of us felt in light of that national tragedy. Toward the end of that gathering 11 years ago, Senator Barbara Mikulski suggested that the members sang "God Bless America," and they did. At the same time, today, during the course of this ceremony, there will be a moment of silence, prayer, as well as the singing of "God Bless America" to celebrate the great effort that has been made by so many to keep America safe and to mourn the loss of those who lost their lives on 9/11. We remember today all of those who were lost and all those who suffered in the terrorist attacks on America. In their honor, may we work to keep alive that sense of unity we felt on that day. And may we do our best to serve the loved ones they left and the nation that they love. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Quorum call on the Senate floor now as lawmakers have been discussing the anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. Right now, members are attending a congressional memorial ceremony taking place on the steps of the U.S. Capitol. We have live coverage of that right now on our companion network, C-SPAN. The Senate did just hold a brief moment of silence on the floor commemorating the 11th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. We do expect to hear more about 9/11 as the day continues in the Senate. Earlier today, President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama held a moment of silence at the White House. There was also a ceremony at the Pentagon with the President, the Defense Secretary, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And also right now, the reading of the names of the victims of the attack happening at the memorial in New York City. You can see that live on our companion network, C-SPAN 3. Lawmakers here in the Senate scheduled to take their usual break for party lunches at 12:30 this afternoon. After that, they'll return at 2:15 to hold that procedural vote related to a jobs bill for military veterans. Live coverage of the Senate, as usual, here on C-SPAN 2, and you can see the House on C-SPAN. While we wait for further debate on the Senate floor, we're going to go back to earlier today to a hearing on border and maritime security held by Homeland Security.
Good morning, everyone, and the Committee on Homeland Security Subcommittee on Border and Maritime Security will come to order. And the subcommittee is meeting today to examine the Department of Homeland Security's ability to prevent terrorists from traveling to the United States. We have an excellent panel of witnesses. I would just remind the committee, though, and the witnesses as well, obviously in remembrance of this day, 9/11, 11 years ago. We have some pictures on the back of this committee of room which remind us all each and every day of why this committee was even formed, the main committee and certainly our subcommittees as well. And there will be a commemorative ceremony at 11 o'clock today. All the members of Congress will be gathering, the House and the Senate, at the East Center staircase for the Congressional Remembrance Ceremony marking the observance of September 11th, 2001. So this committee will be certainly joining our other colleagues, and we'll have opening statements from myself and our ranking member, and then the statements of our witnesses, and we'll see where we are on time because we'll have a hard break probably at about 10 to 11 for folks. Our witnesses today are Kellyanne Walther, who's the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy at the Department, Kevin McClellan, Acting Assistant Commissioner in the Office of Field Operations at Customs and Border Protection, John Woods, Assistant Director for National Security Investigation at ICE, Ed Ramatowski, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Visa Services at the Department of State, and Charles Edwards, the Acting Inspector General at the Department of Homeland Security. 11 years ago today, 19 terrorists, cowards, successfully penetrated our border and visa security defenses and hijacked 4 planes to conduct a terrible, terrible attack against nearly 3,000 innocent people. That act of violence, as I said, is the very reason the Department of Homeland Security exists, and while this committee was created to prevent another terrorist attack on our homeland. We should never forget, of course, what happened on that Tuesday in September when so many of our fellow Americans died tragically, or failed to remember the first responders as well, all of the victims of that tragedy. And one of the ways I think that we can honor those who lost their lives that terrible day is to make sure an attack like that never happens again, to harden our defenses and to take into account the hard lessons that we learned that day. Among the most important weaknesses the attackers exploited was the porous outer ring of border security. The hijackers actually passed through United States border security a combined total of 68 times. And the relative ease with which the terrorists evaded detection by presenting fraudulent documentation, passports, and made detectable false statements on visa applications, gave false statements to border officials, and certainly the failure to watch list known al-Qaeda operatives became missed opportunities to stop those attacks. It's highlighted certainly the need to close the holes exploited by the 9/11 terrorists by strengthening our border security and visa issuance policy. Curtailing the ability of terrorists to travel to the U.S. can be one of the most effective counterterrorism tools because denying terrorists the freedom to travel essentially eliminates their ability to plan or to exercise or to carry out attacks on our homeland. As the 9/11 Commission report noted, it said in the report, for terrorists, travel documents are as important as weapons, which is a very interesting statement, I think. Building on that key insight, we've strengthened our outer ring of border security to conduct more rigorous checks, collect biometric data, and continuously check visa holders against a terrorist watch list. We've pushed our border out by conducting more checks overseas before passengers even board an airplane or present themselves to a CBP officer at any of our ports of entry, a layered approach that increases our chances of preventing terrorists from ever coming to America. Until today, we collect more information on foreign travelers that allows CBP, through the National Targeting Center, to use complex targeting rules which examine travel patterns, allowing agents to find any problems with travel documents that might raise a red flag. And programs such as CBP's Immigration Advisory Program and ICE's visa security units that stations officers and agents overseas are critical components of our success in keeping those with terrorism links and other high-risk passengers off planes that are bound into the United States. Without question, we've made enormous progress limiting the ability of terrorists to travel to the U.S. since 9/11, but certainly the incident of the Christmas Day bomber, that demonstrated that we still had some significant gaps in our visa vetting system. Continually vetting visa electronic system for travel authorization holders against our watch list is a welcome improvement, but we're going to be interested from hearing from our witnesses today how we can further leverage the power of targeting systems to vet visa applicants before a visa is ever issued. Improvements to watch listing processes have increased the ability of consular officers and other border security officials to keep those individuals that concern us out of the country, but we still need to do better. So we'll be interested again to hear from the witnesses on how we vet visa applicants that are known to the intelligence community and how we resolve visa issuance through the Security Advisory Opinion process. Unlike several of this subcommittee's previous hearings where we've discussed the challenges of tracking down visa overstays and the delay in rolling out a reliable exit system that allows Department of Homeland Security to determine if a visa holder has departed in accordance with the terms of their visa, this hearing is really focused on the front end of the visa process. We certainly believe that a viable exit system, of course, is vital to our national security efforts, but it is incumbent on the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of State to also focus their efforts on preventing terrorists from coming into the country in the first place. I also look forward to hearing from the Inspector General in regards to their recent work, which identified challenges with U.S. visits and the multiple names associated with the same set of fingerprints, a gap certainly that needs to be swiftly corrected to prevent fraud and exploitation by any terrorists. Certainly contrary to what some have suggested, al-Qaeda, although diminished in capability thanks to the wonderful work of heroism and professionalism and bravery by our men and women in uniform and our allies, still they are a lethal enemy intent on attacking the homeland. Vigilance is certainly one of the best tools at our disposal to prevent terror travel. So that's why we're here today, to examine those gaps, vulnerability in the visa immigration system, and how they've been addressed in the period since 9/11. The Chair now recognizes the ranking member for his opening statements.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I join Chairman Miller and my colleagues in remembering those who lost their lives in the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001. Our thoughts and our prayers are with them and their families today, the 11th anniversary of this tragedy, and of course, every day our prayers are with them. One way we can honor those who died is to do our utmost to prevent terrorists from traveling to our countries to do us harm. The 9/11 hijackers did not sneak into the country across our land borders, but rather entered the United States via an airplane and carrying visas. The attempted bomber of an airline on Christmas Day 2009 was a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities in the visa process. The Department of Homeland Security and the Department of State, with direction from Congress, have taken important steps to strengthen visa security and to pre-screen air passengers traveling to the United States. With DHS, the U.S. Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE, has expanded its visa security program at our overseas embassies, providing an important additional layer of security in visa securities and security matters. Similarly, the U.S. Customs Border Protection has deployed Immigration Advisory Program officers at foreign airports and strengthened its ability to identify travelers of concern bound for the United States. CBP has also enhanced its efforts at the National Targeting Center to combat terrorist travel. These programs require investments in personnel, technology, and resources, so it is imperative that Congress continues providing DHS the funding it needs to carry out its mission. Today, I look forward to hearing about what security enhancements have been made since the subcommittee met last year on this important issue, as well as what remains to be done. A related issue that I continue to find troubling is that of recalcitrant countries. It is my understanding that certain individuals subject to orders of removal from the United States are often delayed due to their respective governments' refusal to accept the return of their nationals or use lengthy delay tactics. I've raised this issue in previous hearings, and I appreciate the difficult and delicate nature of this issue, but we must address this issue, and we, the chairwoman and I and the committee, look forward to working with you on this issue. However, I look forward to hearing more from the Department and ICE about recommended steps for improvement. So any steps you all might have, any ideas that you might have, please work with our committee. I certainly thank Chairman Miller for having this particular hearing, her leadership, and I appreciate all the witnesses for joining us here. And
I ask unanimous consent to speak as if in morning business for up to 10 minutes.
Objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today we come together on the floor of the United States Senate to remember and honor the victims of September 11, 2001. Only 11 short years ago, on this day, enemies of freedom and equality attacked the United States and murdered thousands of innocent people. From this attack, our nation grew stronger. United by our flag and our beliefs, America rose to defend the homeland and take the battle to our enemies. And it has not been easy. No, it's been a long 11 years of combat in Afghanistan and Iraq. But our military and its leaders have brought the mastermind of the 9/11 attacks, Osama bin Laden, to justice, and for a decade America has been safe from the next round of attacks that we all thought were imminent 11 years ago. None of this could have been accomplished without the brave men and women of our armed forces. On 9/11, the mission of our military changed overnight. Those already enlisted knew they'd be heading for war, and many more joined our military knowing that they too would be headed for combat. From the events of 9/11, the best of America was reborn. A new generation of Americans dedicated to service and preservation of freedom were called to action because of 9/11. These Americans were among the first on the ground in foreign countries. They toppled a dictator, liberated a nation of women and children from an oppressive regime, and brought to justice Osama bin Laden. Today, our overseas operations fighting the war on terror continues. But for many of these soldiers, their tour of duty is over, and they are coming home. They're coming home to family and friends and those who love them, but also to a stagnant economy and record-high unemployment. Today, unemployment amongst those 9/11 veterans is 9.8%. 192,000 post-9/11 veterans are unemployed, and 443,000 9/11 veterans are not even participating in the labor force. The policy of this nation to grow the economy are failing these brave men and women who have fought to protect our freedoms, including economic freedoms. This week, the Senate will take up a bill that will provide $1 billion over 5 years to hire 20,000 veterans. I am proud to support this measure and hope that we'll have the opportunity to debate it and other job-creating measures before we return home at the end of this work period. Since coming to the Senate, job creation has been my #1 priority. I will support taking up and debating any measure relating to this issue, especially those that affect veterans. That is why I was proud to reach across bipartisan lines to work to pass the Vow to Hire Heroes Act and know there is more work to be done. However, it is stunning that we're at this point. After $1 trillion stimulus, bailouts after bailouts, a new government-run health care program that will raise taxes on all Americans, it is time to look our veterans in the eyes and ask, is this working? Is this administration's policies working for thousands of unemployed Nevada veterans who have come back from their service to find their homes underwater and their jobs lost in this great recession. Mr. President, it is not working. The bill we are taking up this week is an acknowledgement that the policies of the past 4 years have not worked. As a result of the failed policies of this administration, Nevada veterans cannot find a job. Our veterans deserve better than this. They deserve a good-paying job, and that is why I will support this measure that we will hopefully take up this afternoon. But I also know that there's much more we can do to provide veterans the opportunities that they deserve. In addition to supporting cloture on the motion to proceed to this bill, I will also be filing my Veterans Small Business Protection Act as an amendment. This legislation I introduced along with Ranking Member Burr of the Veterans Affairs Committee provides that widows and dependents of service members killed in action are not alone to face life running a business while grieving over the loss of a loved one. Congress has provided numerous benefits to our nation's veterans who own a small business: sole source contracting, low-interest loans, and other resources in order to help these small businesses grow and to create jobs. My legislation closes a large gap in federal law that does little for those who own businesses before their activation and were killed in the line of duty. As a member of Congress, we must honor our nation's fallen as well as ensure that the loved ones they leave behind have the same economic opportunities as afforded to that veteran. It's a small token that we can provide to those who gave the ultimate sacrifice for liberty. I hope that we'll have the opportunity to offer amendments this week as we debate the Veterans Job Corps legislation and encourage my colleagues to support my Veterans Small Business Bill. In closing, our nation owes a debt of gratitude to our nation's veterans, and Congress must fulfill the promises and commitments that have been made to all of them. This week, the Senate will continue to work towards providing veterans with a good-paying job, and I support that goal. But if we are going to help small businesses create jobs for veterans and all Americans, we must change the policies coming from Washington, D.C., because it isn't working. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor. I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Acosta.
Remarks from senators expected to be a large part of the day on the floor of the U.S. Senate on this 11th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. The C-SPAN networks have covered the President and First Lady during a moment of silence at the White House this morning. The President also was at a ceremony at the Pentagon with the Defense Secretary and the Joint Chiefs of Staff Chair. And right now, the reading of the names of the victims of the attack happening at a memorial in New York City, which you can see live on our companion network, C-SPAN 3. All of this will be available on our website, cspan.org. Reminder that lawmakers are set to take their usual break for party lunches at 12:30 Eastern. After that, they'll be back at 2:15 to hold a procedural vote on a bill for military veterans. And you can see live coverage of the Senate as usual right here on C-SPAN 2. See the House on C-SPAN. We're going to go back now to that hearing on border and maritime security held by the Department of Homeland Security as we wait for this quorum call to come to a close.
Committee members are reminded that any opening statements they may have can be entered into the record. What I'll do is introduce each one of the witnesses, and then we'll start over here. Give a short bio here. First of all, as I mentioned, we're joined by Ms. Kelly Ann Walther, who currently serves as the Senior Director for the Department of Homeland Security Screening Coordination Office. Ms. Walther began working in the SCO in 2007, where she is currently responsible for setting policy and direction that harmonizes a variety of Department of Homeland Security screening programs and investments. Mr. Kevin McClellan is the Acting Assistant Commissioner at the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, where he is responsible for overseeing CBP's anti-terrorism, immigration, anti-smuggling, trade compliance, and agricultural protection operations at 20 major field offices, 331 ports of entry, and 70 locations in over 40 countries internationally. Mr. John Woods is the Assistant Director at U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, where he oversees the National Security Investigations Division within Homeland Security Investigations. As chief of this 450-person headquarters division, he manages a $160 million operational budget and oversees HSI's investigative, regulatory, and technological programs targeting transnational national security threats arising from illicit travel, trade, and financial enterprises. Mr. Ed Romotowski is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Visa Services at the United States Department of State. In this position, he oversees the visa office in Washington, D.C., 2 domestic processing centers, as well as visa operations at over 200 U.S. embassies, and consulates abroad. He's previously worked as a Special Assistant to the Assistant Secretary of State for Consular Affairs, Chief of the Consular Section at the U.S. Embassy in Nassau, Bahamas, as the U.S. Consul in Warsaw, Poland as well. And Mr. Charles Edwards is the Acting Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security. He has over 20 years of experience in the federal government, has held leadership positions at several federal agencies, including the Transportation Security Administration, the U.S. Postal Service's Office of Inspector General, and the United States Postal Service. And the Chair would now recognize Ms. Walther for her opening testimony.
Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Cuellar, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to highlight our work on preventing terrorist travel. I head the Screening Coordination Office, where we facilitate policy decisions for people screening programs from planning through implementation. We are the DHS coordination point for interagency screening initiatives as well. As the 9/11 Commission pointed out, targeting terrorist travel is one of the most powerful weapons we have to counter terrorist operations. Today's threat environment is complex and multifaceted, so it is imperative we employ layers of security throughout the travel continuum to identify individuals that may pose a risk before they reach the United States. We recognize there is no one-size-fits-all approach to security. Our approach includes close coordination with counterterrorism, law enforcement, and public security authorities, the private sector, and our state, local, tribal, territorial, and foreign partners. To support these efforts, DHS collects biographic and biometric data for screening against various databases to track known threats. We utilize intelligence-based targeting rules and risk-based screening to better identify unknown threats. A risk-based approach is the foundation of the DHS model today and in a more comprehensive and sophisticated form than ever before. With the advent of better information technology, DHS has been able to apply this approach across the life cycle of a traveler's journey, including first, when a traveler seeks an authorization to travel, either a visa or an ESTA, Second, just prior to travel, when DHS conducts passenger manifest and reservation screening. Third, when a person seeks to board a commercial aircraft or vessel, passengers must undergo physical screening. And finally, upon arrival at a port of entry, when a traveler seeks admission to the United States, DHS conducts verification of a traveler's identity and identity documents. Today, the Visa Waiver Program is more robust than ever before, with strengthened international partnerships and enhanced information sharing arrangements. Today, we receive data we never had access to before, and we now conduct ESTA checks on every VWP traveler. In the last 3 years, DHS has also achieved a major aviation security milestone by assuming responsibility for terrorist watch list screening for all aircraft operators covered by the Secure Flight Final Rule. Today, Secure Flight vets 100% of all commercial airline passengers flying into, out of, and within the United States, approximately 2 million passengers every day. We know that implementing such secure measures must be done while ensuring the facilitation of legitimate trade and travel. Trusted traveler programs such as Global Entry include over 1.4 million pre-approved low-risk travelers who may undergo expedited inspection. These individuals are our most frequent border crossing travelers, and because they are known, they usually enter the United States in a fraction of the time of other individuals. Additionally, TSA has implemented its PreCheck expedited screening program. TSA PreCheck uses intelligence-driven information and a risk-based approach to provide more effective screening, focusing resources on those travelers we know the least about, while providing expedited screening and a better experience for travelers we know the most about. In the past 10 years, we've made great strides to facilitate the known traveler, leaving us more time to identify the unknown threat. But let me be clear, no Visa, ESTA, Trusted Traveler program provides carte blanche to enter the United States. Throughout all the phases of travel, DHS is constantly monitoring changes to the watch list that could lead to recommendations against boarding or revocation of a visa, refusal of admission, or even removal of an individual. DHS mitigates risks in a way that effectively establishes and uses security measures to promote the safe movement of people and commerce while respecting privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties. With this in mind, DHS is also deliberate in its efforts to provide travelers an opportunity to be heard. The DHS Traveler Redress Inquiry Program, or DHS TRIP, is a single point of contact for individuals, regardless of citizenship, who have inquiries or seek resolution of difficulties they experience during travel. Today, in response to 9/11 and evolving threats, we have significantly adapted and enhanced our ability to detect travel threats at the earliest opportunity. DHS does not work alone in this mission. Terrorist screening is a multi-agency and collaborative effort. More work remains to be done, but Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Cuellar, I can assure you that the men and women of the Department of Homeland Security never forget. Our goal is to keep the country safe. For us, it is not a job, it is a mission. Thank you for this opportunity to update the committee on the progress the Department has made in recent years, and thank you for holding this hearing. I've submitted written testimony and respectfully request it be made part of the hearing record. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. The Chair now recognizes Mr. McAleen. I hope I'm pronouncing it correct.
Very close, ma'am. McAleenan.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Cuellar, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify here this morning about U.S. Customs and Border Protection's efforts to disrupt terrorist travel. On the 11th anniversary of the 9/11 terrorist attacks, CBP remains vigilant and focused. As the nation's unified border security agency, CBP is responsible for securing our nation's borders while facilitating legitimate trade and travel that is so vital to our economic health. Within this broad responsibility, our priority mission is to prevent terrorists and terrorist weapons from entering the country. And as a result of this committee's support, our strong government and private sector partnerships, advances in technology, and application of intelligence, CBP and DHS are more capable than ever before in our efforts to identify and mitigate terrorist threats before they reach the United States. A traveler's risk is now assessed from the moment he or she applies for a visa through the Department of State or for travel authorization through CBP's ESTA program. To address the higher risk in the international air environment, which remains a primary target for terrorist organizations seeking to move operatives or attempt attacks, CBP leverages advanced travel information from air carrier reservation and check-in systems. CBP's National Targeting Center, or NTC, analyzes this data through the automated targeting system and uses advanced software to apply intelligence-driven targeting rules to conduct risk assessments. If information indicating a potential risk is discovered, NTC will issue a no-board recommendation to air carriers preventing travel of a suspect individual. Internationally, the NTC supports the work of CBP's Immigration Advisory Program to extend the nation's zone of security beyond our physical borders to 11 airports in 9 foreign countries, where we work with carriers and foreign authorities to identify and address potential threats prior to boarding. To put our pre-departure efforts in context, in fiscal year 2009, before the Christmas Day attempt, the NTC and IAP teams made fewer than 500 no-board recommendations to carriers for security purposes. This fiscal year, in contrast, the NTC and IAP teams have made almost 4,000 no-board recommendations, a dramatic increase that has enhanced the security of our borders and international air travel. While the focus of our pre-departure work is in the air environment, we also maintain robust protocols upon arrival at U.S. ports of entry. Prior to admission at any U.S. port of entry, whether by air, land, or sea, CBP officers further assess traveler risk by scanning entry and identity documents, conducting personal interviews, and running appropriate biometric and biographic queries against law enforcement databases. If there are any matches to suspected terrorist records, CBP activates its counterterrorism response protocols. These protocols are aided by the fact that the National Targeting Center has become a critical interagency counterterrorism resource, with representatives from over a dozen departments and agencies, including full units from ICE, TSA, the U.S. Coast Guard, and soon to be the Department of State. And together we are assessing risk at each stage in the travel cycle and working together to enhance our collective response. As this committee is well aware, we continue to live in a world of ever-changing threats, and we must adapt and evolve to identify and address security gaps and anticipate vulnerabilities. CBP will continue to be at the forefront of the global effort against terrorism, and we will work with our colleagues within DHS, Department of State, and the intelligence and law enforcement communities to meet these challenges. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify about our work at CBP on this solemn anniversary. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much. And the Chair now recognizes Mr. Woods for his testimony.
Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Cuellar, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss ICE's efforts to prevent terrorist travel and the exploitation of our immigration system. Visa overstays and other forms of status violation bring together 2 critical areas of ICE's mission, in both national security and immigration enforcement, and the importance of determining who to allow to enter the United States and ensuring compliance with conditions of such entry cannot be overstated. As you know, ICE's Visa Security Program, or VSP, interdicts criminals, terrorists, and others who would exploit our legal visa process to enter the United States and serves as the agency's front line in protecting the United States against terrorist and criminal organizations. The VSP integrates DHS law enforcement equities into the visa process to advance our nation's border security initiatives. Under the VSP, ICE special agents are assigned to visa security units at high priority diplomatic posts worldwide to conduct visa security activities and help identify potential criminal and terrorist threats before they would have the opportunity to reach our ports of entry. The VSP currently screens and vets selected non-immigrant and immigrant visa applications prior to visa issuance. In support of our efforts to enhance visa security measures, representatives on the panel here today from the ICE, CBP, Department of State, including the U.S. intelligence community, are developing an automated visa screening process that will enable ICE to identify derogatory information related to all non-immigrant visa applicants prior to their adjudication by consular officers. This process may be used as a precursor to or in conjunction with our current Department of State Security Advisory Opinion and Advisory Opinion programs. When an alien files for non-immigrant visa application electronically, it goes to the Department of State's Consular Electronic Application Center, or the CEAC. ICE's information technology modernization efforts will allow ICE to obtain the non-immigrant visa application information directly from CEAC, screen it against DHS and intelligence community data before it goes to consular offices for adjudication. This automated screening process will significantly enhance the U.S. government's anti-terrorism efforts by aiding another layer of security to our border protection efforts. In addition to the VSP, ICE's Counterterrorism and Criminal Exploitation Unit, or the CTCEU, is dedicated to the enforcement of non-immigrant visa violations. Today, through the CTCEU, ICE proactively develops cases for investigation through the Student Exchange Visitor Program and the U.S. Visit Program. These programs enable ICE to access information about millions of students, tourists, and temporary workers present in the United States at any given time, and identify those who have overstayed or otherwise violated the terms of their condition of admission. Special agents and analysts at ICE monitor the latest threat reports and proactively address emergent issues. This practice has contributed to ICE's counterterrorism mission by supporting high-priority national security initiatives. based on specific intelligence. The practice is designed to identify individuals exhibiting specific risk factors on intelligence reporting, including international travel from specific geographic locations and in-depth research of dynamic social networks. This person-centric approach of non-immigrant prioritization moves away from our traditional methods of identification and thereby enhances the way threats are identified and resolved. As we move forward, it is imperative that we continue to expand the nation's enforcement efforts concerning overstays and other status violations, with special emphasis on those who threaten our national security and public safety. Accordingly, ICE is analyzing various approaches to this issue, including sharpening the focus of programs that address vulnerabilities that are exploited by visa violators, such as the DHS Overstay Initiative and CTCU's School Fraud Targeting Program. Effective border security measures require broad information sharing and cooperation amongst U.S. agencies. On January 11, 2011, ICE signed a Memorandum of Understanding outlining the roles and responsibilities and collaboration between ICE and the Department of State's Consular Affairs and Diplomatic Security. This MOU governs the day-to-day operations of ICE agents conducting visa security operations at U.S. embassies and consulates abroad. And to facilitate this information sharing, it reduces duplication of efforts by both ICE and the Department of State by supporting collaborative training and orientation prior to overseas assignments. The VSP is at high priority U.S. embassies and consulates brings an important law enforcement element to the visa review process, and this relationship serves as an avenue for VSP personnel to alert consular offices and other U.S. government personnel to potential security risks. More than a decade after the 9/11 attacks, ICE has made significant progress in preventing terrorists from exploiting our visa process, and we look forward to working closely with the subcommittee in the future to enhance those efforts. I want to thank you again for the opportunity to appear today, and I will be pleased to answer any questions you have.
Thank the gentleman. The chair now recognizes Mr. Ramatowski.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Ranking Member Cuellar, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. As a consular officer with 26 years of experience in the U.S. Foreign Service, it is a solemn occasion for me to testify here today on the 11th anniversary of the September 11th attacks, and I thank you for the opportunity to update you on how we continue to improve visa security to prevent such an attack from ever taking place again. Our highest priority is the safety of American citizens at home and abroad. Together with our partner agencies, we've built a layered visa and border security screening system resting on technological advances, biometric innovations, consular interviews, expanded data sharing, and improved consular training. The Department of State is constantly developing, implementing, and refining an intensive visa application and screening process. This process incorporates personal interviews in most cases and multiple biographic and biometric checks supported by a sophisticated global information technology network. We share this data among the Department and federal law enforcement and intelligence agencies. Security remains our primary mission. For us, every visa decision is a national security decision. Our electronic visa applications provide consular and fraud prevention officers, as well as our intelligence and law enforcement partners, the opportunity to analyze an applicant's data in advance of the visa interview so that these partners may detect potential non-biographic links to derogatory information. We are currently working with our partners on two major initiatives to screen more of this data with the law enforcement and intelligence communities and make the visa system even more secure. In addition to these biographic checks, the Department screens the fingerprints of visa applicants against DHS and FBI databases and uses facial recognition technology to check applicants against a watch list of photos obtained from the Terrorist Screening Center, as well as visa applicant photos contained in our Consular Consolidated Database. Other agencies access our large database of visa information for security screening, law enforcement, and counterterrorism purposes. We specifically designed our systems to facilitate comprehensive sharing. We cooperate with law enforcement and intelligence agencies and benefit from their capabilities and resources. This is most dramatically evident in the continuous vetting of visa holders, so that derogatory information that surfaces after a visa is issued is promptly reviewed and the visa revoked, if warranted, by a dedicated revocation unit on a 24/7 basis. More than 8,000 visas have been revoked under the continuous vetting program since 2010. Consular officers are also thoroughly trained prior to making visa decisions. Each officer completes our consular course, which has a strong emphasis on border security and fraud prevention, and includes in-depth training on interviewing and name-checking techniques. Officers also receive continuing education in all of these disciplines throughout their careers. On your next trip abroad, I would encourage you and all members of the committee to visit the consular sections of the U.S. Embassy or consulate to see these procedures firsthand and to observe how our dedicated consular personnel are carrying out their border security responsibilities. Distinguished members of the committee, our unique layered approach to border security screening, in which each agency applies its particular strengths and expertise, best serves our border security agenda while furthering compelling U.S. interests in legitimate travel, trade promotion, and the exchange of ideas. The United States must protect and advance all of these interests to guarantee our long-term security. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear today, and I'm ready to answer your questions.
Thank the gentleman. The chair now recognizes Mr. Edwards for his testimony.
Good morning, Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Cuellar, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me to testify today regarding border security to detect and deter terrorist travel. I will present the results of 3 reports that we issued in the past year on this topic. Specifically, we looked at resources and coordination among DHS agencies to screen foreign nationals and protect the border. Controls at U.S. visit to identify potentially fraudulent attempts to enter the United States, and TSA's implementation of the Secure Flight program. The infrastructure for securing our borders is layered. Federal entities such as Department of State and DHS components like CBP, TSA, U.S. Visit, and ICE make vital contributions to border security. In addition, other federal, state, and local entities play critical roles in this layered strategy. However, technological issues, resource deficiencies, and interagency coordination present significant challenges. For example, DHS officers at any of the 327 air, sea, or land border ports of entry have to access as many as 17 different DHS systems to verify the identity of foreign nationals and make admission decisions. Some components have made progress in streamlining their systems. However, mobile devices, such as used by some CBP officers and Border Patrol agents, continue to lack adequate bandwidth and technology. This can hinder officers in the field attempting to fingerprint aliens or accessing law enforcement and immigrant databases. In addition, long-standing mission overlap and inadequate information sharing between CBP and ICE agents at the northern border have sometimes led to duplication of effort and concerns over officer safety. The Department concurred with 5 of the 8 recommendations and has implemented actions to address our findings. DHS has even taken actions to close 2 of the 3 recommendations with which it did not concur, and we expect the final recommendation to be closed next month. U.S. Visit is designed to collect and analyze foreign nationals' biographic and biometric data and provide timely, accurate information to border enforcement officials to prevent entries of potentially fraudulent and dangerous individuals. However, we found hundreds of thousands of instances where the same fingerprint was recorded in U.S. Visit's database with sometimes as many as 14 different names and dates of birth. The vast majority of this faulty data is attributable to data entry errors in the name and date fields. However, U.S. Visit officials were unable to quantify how many of those inconsistencies came from individuals purposefully presenting fraudulent information at the border. Our report identified a number of instances where individuals with derogatory information, such as criminal aliens, supplied different biographic information to CBP officers in an attempt to enter the United States. These individuals were not flagged in the IDENT database. U.S. Visit concurred with our recommendations to improve procedures to target, identify fraud. Another pillar in the fight against terrorism is TSA's Secure Flight program. Through this program, TSA assumed from commercial operators the matching of passenger names against the terrorist watch list. If passenger information matches closely enough against the watch list record, a TSA analyst must complete a manual review of that passenger's record. Unless the match is resolved, the boarding pass cannot be printed until the passenger provides identification to the aircraft operator and TSA. TSA may also require a passenger to undergo additional screening at a security checkpoint or deny that person access beyond the security area altogether. The standardization effected by Secure Flight has resulted in more consistent watch list matching process. However, Secure Flight's watch list matching results are sometimes disrupted by DHS and aircraft operator system outages. In some instances, aircraft operators have overridden TSA controls and allowed inhibited individuals to board the aircraft. In response to our recommendations, TSA has taken steps to address these issues. Madam Chair, this concludes my prepared remarks. I thank you again for the opportunity to testify before this committee, and I would be happy to answer any questions you or the members might have. Thank you.
Thank you all very much, and I certainly appreciate your service to the country, first of all. And one of the things that I think we all learned from the 9/11 Commission recommendation, well, there were a number of excellent recommendations in this document, and I'll tell you, in our office, we don't regard this as shelfware. We use it all the time. We're constantly referencing it on all various points. But certainly one of the things that has always stuck in my mind is that we need to move from the need to know to need to share information. And when we talk about visa overstays or problems with the visa application process that we've had in our nation, first of all, let's all recognize that we have made unbelievable positive strides forward since 9/11 in our processes, but the largest room is always a room for improvement, I suppose. And I think it's particularly so when I mentioned about the Christmas Day bomber in my opening remarks, but, you know, with the kind of threat that we face, these enemies of freedom are looking at a battlefield in a different optics, I suppose you could say, than we ever have before. They see the battlefield in a very asymmetrical way. And certainly on that particular day, the Christmas Day bomber saw the battlefield as seat 19A on that Northwest flight. That was the battlefield for him. And I know that we had you know, problems in the visa application process with that particular individual because of a spelling error was brought to everybody's attention, et cetera. And subsequently, since that time, we have had, and again, tremendous strides forward, I think, in our visa process as we're doing the vetting against the watch listing, how you're doing your initial application checks, et cetera. And so I guess my question is, and I know the revocation process has significantly increased since that time as well, all to the good. And I guess my question would be, if you could flesh out a bit how something like that had happened, how it hopefully would not happen in the future, as you think about, again, sort of the need to know to the need to share information on how cooperation is happening in a better way with the various agencies, the Department of State, CBP, your overseas consular applications, et cetera. I'm not sure who I'm addressing this to.
I'm happy to kick it off. The interagency conducted a complete review following the events of 12/25 in 2009 and took several significant steps following that event. One of our largest was the robust interagency process to revise the criteria for nominations to the watch list to close gaps. And we also have 100% vetting of all commercial airline passengers today through Secure Flight. CBP also vets on a recurrent basis all visa holders. CBP's pre-departure program pushed back the vetting of passengers before they board a plane. As an international effort, working with our international partners, DHS worked with the International Civil Aviation Organization, looking at a global framework for how we look at aviation security. That framework was supported by nearly 190 countries.
Mr. President,